Hi, everybody. It's very nice to be here. Welcome, Elena, as well.
Thank you.
We're going to talk about macro factors, including regulation and geopolitical events regarding crypto assets and how they're interconnected in a way for the next 30 minutes. We also will have some time for questions. So if you're up for asking anything about those topics, you could scan the QR code over there, and you can add a question or two, and also you can upvote the other questions, and we're going to answer like the top few of them. It's really easy, so I encourage you to use that app as well. Elena, I was curious to ask you, because we've never met, and I know you have a lot of experience regarding finance and regulation.
Yeah.
But what do you think is the biggest macroeconomic driver for crypto assets right now at the moment and looking forward into the next 6 to 12 months?
Thanks, Blagovest, and very nice to meet you all. I'm very excited to be here in Sofia having this fireside chat. This is a great question, right? And I had a view on this, and I also asked around a few people I know from very diverse backgrounds in crypto to see whether or not my view, which is very influenced by my background, was actually about right, or whether or not I was very biased. And it turns out that actually my view, I think, mirrors at least the majority of the responses I got back. So I think there are two macroeconomic drivers that we can talk about in the next 12 months. The first, of course, is the change in the interest rate environment, which I think you and I can cover a bit later on, which I'm not an expert on at all, but Blagovest can talk about, I think, much more convincingly than me. But the big elephant in the room that everyone talked about is the US election and the implications that this will have for the US regulatory framework for crypto, the regulatory, I guess, kind of US regulatory position at federal level in the crypto market, and therefore for the industry as a whole. That is the number one topic people are worried about. And that is obviously happening very soon. I think it's the beginning of November. And, you know, we can actually, do you want to, I just spent actually a month in New York. I came back from New York literally 2 days ago. In fact, I'm still jet lagged from the flight. So we could actually cover a little bit what I saw there and what people have been saying, if that's of interest.
That'll be quite interesting.
Yeah, so, again, I met a lot of people in New York. I went to a lot of places. I also visited the Bitcoin pub key, which it turns out Donald Trump actually visited 2 weeks before me. In a clear sign that he's very pro-crypto. So I think everybody is aware of the fact that Trump is publicly pro-crypto. He has said he's going to set up a Bitcoin fund. He has said he's going to fire the chairman, well, the head of the SEC, Gary Gensler, and he has also actually just launched his own token about 3 days ago. So he is really playing to the crypto market. He's really playing to crypto voters to get some support. And that's been a very, very big topic in election year in the US. In fact, it's been a topic which has dwarfed a lot of other topics, which surprised people. The reason I think this is interesting for us and for crypto is because when you look at the kind of a new technology like this, which has a kind of financial side and a financial angle, one of the biggest things that it can impact its growth is an uncertain regulatory environment, right? That impacts growth, it impacts institutional adoption. It makes it actually very difficult to stand up and run a business if you don't really know what the rules are, right? I'm saying something that people know. And so the mood in the US, as a result of what's been going on there the last few years, has not been the most positive, right? I went to Consensus in the middle of the year. Blagovest and I were talking about people not that positive. I think the mood in the US is changing because both political candidates, both Trump and Kamala, have had to sort of come out with a slightly pro-crypto stance, right? Trump is definitely pro-crypto based on what he said. People think if he is elected that he's going to come up with a new regulatory regime for crypto, he's going to sanction it, he's going to sponsor it, and the crypto market will fly, right? That's sort of one option. Kamala, no one really knows what she actually thinks. She has made a few statements about digital assets, but to my mind, when you say digital assets, that means anything, right? That can mean like private permissioned blockchain that's run by a bank. So we don't quite know where she's going to end up. But the consensus from the policy people in the US that I've spoken to is that no matter who wins, there will be some crypto legislation. It's not going to be this year, right? It will be next year, and it'll probably start with stablecoins because that is the first and the most obvious thing to regulate. It's not going to be a CBDC. It will be some type of stablecoin legislation. And how quickly the crypto framework ramps up from there and what happens, I think really actually depends on who wins. So it's a very long answer, Blagovest. But
so you think that despite who wins, there will be more regulatory clarity in the next year?
Yes. That's the short answer, yeah.
Either way, it's good for the business and the industry overall?
Yeah, it is,
And
yeah.
what could be the worst case scenario? Let's say Kamala, who is less pro-crypto, or we don't really know exactly her stance and the administration that she would bring, but what could be the worst case scenario if she's the winner, and what could happen?
I think, the US, they know that crypto is growing as a market. They know that it needs some regulation, right? But regulating at federal level is always hard in the US because of the way their system works, right? Their legal system works. You've got to actually convince essentially two separate houses of parliament to actually pass legislation. Crypto seems to be quite a bipartisan topic, right? Everyone agrees that some regulatory framework is needed. The Democrats and the Republicans, I think, agree on this. The worst case scenario is that you just have more of the same, Blagovest, because everyone agrees you need to do something, but going from, we need to do something, to like, here's legislation we're going to pass, we're going to stand up this regulatory regime, that actually takes a fair bit of time, and it takes people to agree to the same thing. So worst case scenario, no matter who wins, right, is that in the next year, everything just like keeps going and people just keep talking about legislation. There's some crypto legislation in front of Congress now, actually, hasn't really gone anywhere. You just get more of the same, and that that the US regulator, which thinks it's the main regulator for crypto, the SEC just keeps, regulating by enforcement, as you call it, just keeps, suing the exchanges, suing the projects, kind of going after them. So you just have another year of, we're not really sure what's going to happen. That's the worst case scenario. And it's possible that this will happen, but I think the more likely option is that you'll see some improvement in the next 12 months.
Mm-hmm. Another question that pops into my mind is everybody seems to be very excited about a Trump win, but what could be a negative surprise if he wins regarding regulation or anything regarding crypto? Is there anything in your mind?
Well, we don't. That's also a very good question, right? Because he's done the kind of typical marketing thing where he's sort of out there like buying burgers with Bitcoin and launched his own token and is like, I really believe in DeFi.
Yeah, it is very obvious that he doesn't really deeply understand crypto.
No. Crypto is a really complex market, right? And the devil in crypto regulation is in the detail. Right? People can say all sorts of stuff about, I want to, promote innovation. I want the technology to like fly. I want to like support this, but then they tend to hand responsibility, because as the president does, for kind of writing the crypto rules to people who write them, and responsibility to the federal agencies that will have to actually oversee crypto. So, I mean, I think the worst case scenario if Trump wins is that he just doesn't do anything very quickly, right? That he leaves the status quo because he delegates to people to do something about crypto, and then it just kind of sits there in this, sphere of like current situation where we're not sure like how it's regulated, and is it a commodity or a security, which regulatory agency actually has jurisdiction over it. So if he leaves these questions unanswered for another year and a half, that to me is the worst case scenario.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Just to add my opinion on this topic is that in terms of market expectations, the elections they're having a lot of uncertainty, and people are waiting for the clouds to go away in a way, and for crypto to take its path forward, like it's been for the past few years. And as you said, once the election is cleared away as a problem, things will get on their normal on the normal path to adoption, because it's not about politics that much, and the killer apps of crypto are developing despite unfavorable regulation in the recent years.
Yeah.
And those, in my mind, are stablecoins, store of value, and gambling. And those are independent of course, they could be diminished in a way by unfavorable regulation, but still, there is a lot of room for them to grow.
Because you say, Blagovest, it's interesting that stablecoins are developing despite an unfavorable regulatory environment, right? Which in the US is for sure, that's the case. But what about outside the US? Because the thing that has happened obviously in Europe is we have MiCA, which is the Markets and Crypto Assets Regulation, was passed middle of this year. It regulates stablecoins, it regulates them quite seriously. But that doesn't seem to have halted adoption. In fact, it's the opposite, because they're now regulated. Maybe the market has more trust in them. What's your view on that?
I expect there is both sides of this situation. For smaller businesses, it's going to be much more difficult because of overhead expenses will rise dramatically. And not just expenses, but time wasted for bureaucracy will increase significantly. I think people underestimate how much that will affect innovation in small businesses in crypto. On the other hand, larger exchanges and overall bigger financial institutions, including banks, they will feel more secure to enter into the space. So they wouldn't be as hostile to crypto businesses that are already regulated. I mean, it would be already illegal to close down accounts if you're a licensed entity. So that's better in a way. That means better banking, more stable banking, and also more clarity for bigger institutions to join in. So that's definitely better in the long term. But at the same time, there will be problems. For example, Tether, which is obviously the biggest cryptocurrency, they decided not to go for being regulated in Europe. So that's going to disrupt some of the liquidity in the exchanges. And there is also a lot more things that haven't really surfaced yet because MiCA is not in action. We're going to see maybe starting early next year and mid next year to see the effects, how the users will be affected in a way. And there will be more KYC, there will be less privacy, there will be more documentation and bureaucracy even compared to what it is now. The AML regulation is also worse with MiCA. It's adding more layers on a system that's already overburdening both the business and the users. So yeah, it's a complex situation. Hopefully it's going to be for better long term, but we'll see. We'll see. Maybe end of 25 we'll have some initial possibilities to evaluate if that was a good thing or not.
I agree with you on all of this, Blagovest. I mean, I worked in a bank for a long time and lots of different departments as a lawyer, and I stood up really big regulatory change projects. And you can't underestimate how difficult and expensive it is to comply with regulation, right? Financial service, like proper financial services regulation. And there is an argument that if you regulate the industry, it will die, and it won't maybe die completely, but it'll it'll slow the pace of innovation, which has been the great thing about crypto, right? And coming from like a long time in a bank where like doing innovation was nothing like working in crypto, right? It took so long and it wasn't that innovative. I don't really want that to happen, but I think you're right that there is a risk here and you have to kind of wait and see how it pans out. A lot will depend on how it's actually implemented, I think. Going on to kind of other macroeconomic factors, I know we kind of talked a bit before, but what do you think is something else that's actually very...
Well, I'm generally quite interested in the price action and how the whole cycle is evolving. That's our job in a way to follow that. We're walking a very thin line between keeping the economy from falling down into a recession and on the other hand, keeping inflation low. And I'm talking specifically for the US. Most other places in the developed world, inflation is already quite low, but at the same time, economic growth is not that strong. Yeah. In the US, inflation is on the higher end. It's still above target. That's normal for the Fed to be easy in a way with the monetary policy. However, the economic growth is also above trend still, which is quite good. It's above 3%. The projection of the US economy growth is more than 3% for Q3. And if it stays that for long, and no inflation rising above, let's say, 0.3 monthly core PCE, that's going to be the Goldilocks situation where crypto could potentially unfold into a more speculative cycle that I believe a lot of people are waiting for. But there's a good chance that this doesn't happen, or that it's slowed down by either of those two worsening. And it could also depend on the outcome of the elections. So this is a very, very narrow road that we are walking on, and we'll see. Probably within the next 6 months, it's going to be clear which way we're going, in a way.
Interesting. It's in line with, I think, what I've been hearing. And we can't really predict it at the moment. And you're right. I think the outcome of the U.S. election is going to have quite an impact, at least short term, on the market. Actually, depending on what happens.
Yeah, probably so. I mean, the overspending in terms of fiscal policy will probably continue under both administrations.
Yeah.
Regarding interest rates, there is some speculation that Republicans will be more hawkish, and overall with the monetary policy. And they'll be more concerned about inflation, whereas a democratic government will be more willing to spend and stimulate and ease monetary policy. So that's also quite important for the next year or so. But over the very long term, nothing really changes because the trajectory is clear of there is significant fiscal dominance where the markets will be influenced by politics and the propensity of the governments to spend a lot more than usual. And the central banks will be really in between the hard rock and the hard place in the rock by trying to find a clear way between inflation and the recession, which is a very difficult thing to do. And but apart from the US, there is just so much going on in the world. And I'm shifting a little bit here to a few other topics. Let me see how much time I've got left. Got about 10 minutes. We've got natural crypto adoption that's happening in places like high inflation countries, like Argentina, like Turkey. Turkey is so closed. I mean, a lot of you probably have seen how much they're using stablecoins over there. Places like war zones, like Ukraine, or the Middle East, or Iran, or Russia. It seems like stablecoins are really, really useful over there. And that's probably gonna increase in terms of usefulness over time, no matter what happens with the elections. At the same time, we've got small but very good examples of forward-looking countries like El Salvador, who are adopting crypto and trying to get an edge with this kind of policies. Overall usefulness will continue to climb, and with the uncertainty of the geopolitical events over the world, having a mobile part of your net worth, it's increasingly important because you don't rely on the banking system, you don't rely on customs, on local regulation, on anything, and just having a portion of your assets in Bitcoin specifically could turn out to be a very good decision for a lot of people. And I think a lot of people, including people in the older generations that have a lot of money accumulated, they're already awakened to that idea. And it's going to grow even more in the next 5-10 years when geopolitical tensions are unfolding, because it seems like the worst is not behind us, unfortunately, in that regard. No matter if that's Middle East or U.S.-China relationships or overall deglobalization and distrust in the system. But that's also the only way a new global currency could emerge if the system was stable and there was no disagreement. Probably nobody would allow it to happen. But now we have a reason to choose an independent alternative that the crypto represents, in a way. What's your take on this whole situation, including geopolitics and the usefulness of crypto overall?
I mean, look, I agree with everything you've said, actually, Blagovest. My background was I'm actually Bulgarian, although I left when I was a child. I lived in Zimbabwe till I was 15, which obviously Zimbabwe now is in a different place to where it was. And then I went to the other side of the world and lived in New Zealand, which is a pretty first world country. But, especially living for a long time in a developing country, which I did, in Africa, people don't trust the government there, right? And actually, I was in South Africa recently, and to my great surprise, although we know that crypto has quite widespread adoption in South Africa, you would be surprised at the people who hold crypto. People who work in restaurants, people who are not super tech savvy, they all hold crypto, and they will hold a mixture of, I would say, Bitcoin, because I sort of asked around Ethereum and some stable coins. So, as people become more tech savvy, and I think as the kind of, let's just call it the user interface and the custody, the ways you can kind of hold crypto become more safe, more easily accessible, I think that will drive some pretty serious adoption, actually, especially in these emerging markets. Because if people are already going through the trouble of actually holding it in a self-custodial wallet when it wasn't that easy to do it, I think if you make it even slightly easier, and the more stable coins there are out there, the more people will actually hold this. The thing that I wonder in the back of my mind on this, right, is stable coins, I think if you let them be, there'll be huge adoption, not just by people, also by institutions. If I'm a company with different branches in different countries, do I want to use the banking system and do all the FX, pay all the fees to to basically send money from A to B to my branch or subsidiary, or would I rather use a stable coin? I mean, I think the answer is pretty simple. So you'll see quite a lot of institutional adoption in this space too. The one open question I have is, how is that going to tally with governments of certain countries who may not want to completely, who may not want to even partially give up control of effectively the money supply, and because that's the question you get into with adoption of crypto in that way, and that's the difficult question. You don't know how that's going to pan out. Don't know if you've got any views on that, actually, Blagovest, because I've been thinking a lot about it, but.
Let me continue because we're running out of time. I saw on your resume, if I'm not mistaken, that you spent some of your time in New Zealand.
Yes.
Is that true? What is the overall attitude in that part of the world, New Zealand and Australia, towards crypto in general? If you can brief us on that.
So it's a good question. I haven't lived in New Zealand for ages. I lived in London for 16 years. So I haven't actually been there full time recently. I think, but there is an Australian in the audience here somewhere too. I think the attitude is overall positive. People do use it. There is adoption. It's being regulated there. But I think if you're talking about kind of holding stablecoins and holding Bitcoin as a hedge, the thing that you have in Australia and New Zealand is that people trust the government, right? You have stable currencies, like people trust the government there. So I don't think that you will see necessarily the same type of adoption in the same way that you would in like somewhere like Turkey, right, where there's like huge inflation, and so people are just looking for an immediate like not a hedge, but something safe to put their money into. You won't have that pattern of adoption in Australia and New Zealand because they're more like the UK or the US or sort of countries in the EU like here, where you sort of trust the government and you've got an exchange rate that's relatively settled. That's sort of my view, personal view.
Okay. So we've got a few questions from the audience, and I'll choose the first one or two. The first one is Ivan from Empire. How are current war conflicts influencing crypto? How about a possible China-Taiwan conflict? What will the long-term impact be on this? So we touched a little bit on war conflicts, but not much. Do you want to comment on that, or I should take it?
I'm going to make one comment, then I think you say, because you're more the expert. But I was actually Googling that this morning. And there is a study that came out after the Russia-Ukraine conflict started that said actually when the conflict started, crypto adoption dropped, but then it grew after the conflict started. So the sort of, I don't think the effect is as clear as like, oh, there is a conflict, people stop using crypto. It might actually increase adoption depending on what the conflict is and who's affected. So, but I think I'm quite interested in your view on that, Blagovest, actually, because I know you've done a lot of thinking about it.
Well, I think in the very short term, that will be negative for the price, because in order for crypto to grow, even Bitcoin, it's still a risky asset, and it's important for people to be willing to take more risk. Yeah. So additional geopolitical conflict, and especially a conflict between China, Taiwan, and the US in a way, it will be very devastating for risk assets for the very short term. However, in the longer term, in the medium and longer term, such conflicts are predisposition for a higher usage of both store of value, mobile network in a way, and also stable coins for payments and transactions and cross-border transfers of money. So, and overall, this will increase the distrust in the system, and it will divide the world more, which is definitely not good for us as citizens. But also, this is exactly the situation that crypto was built for, where you don't trust the other parties, and you actually need to choose a independent technological solution for whatever you want to do. And of course, China-Taiwan is a very serious conflict, so that's going to impact a lot of, that's probably a certain recession and maybe high inflation, almost guaranteed if such a thing happens, because of the semiconductor market and the supply chains that are going to be disrupted after that. So it's going to be a big problem. So we take last question, and there will be a break afterwards. So we've got a few. Okay, here is one. Do you think that the money printer will ever stop? And if no, does it really matter who is the president?
I love this question. Do I think the money printer will stop? I will do an answer, then I think we need your view on it. I don't think in the short term it looks like it's going to stop, right? So I think I think no, in the short term, it doesn't look like the money printer's going to stop, but you gave a much more elaborate answer on that earlier. Does it matter who's the president? So actually in the US, the president mainly has influence over foreign policy. Constitutionally, they can't actually do that much domestically, but they do have influence, obviously, just aside from that sort of legal question. I think if we're talking about the US president, who the US president is and what policy they have will dictate how friendly the US is going to be towards crypto and crypto adoption. So it will have an impact on the market, regardless of whether or not they print more money or who prints more money. There'll be maybe there'll be a little bit of rebalancing, but I think given how unfriendly the crypto regulatory framework has been to crypto in the US, having the right president will make a big difference there. So that's my answer. Blagovest, you'll have probably slightly different take
mine
on
is
this.
quite simple. Unfortunately, we are in a stage where populism is governing most of the decisions, and not just basically in many places in the world, especially the developed world. And populism has the major tool for delivering its promises is printing more money, taking more debt, and monetizing that debt. Also the buildup of government debt is so high that servicing the interest rate will already be a big burden for the Western governments. And that is really the train that cannot be stopped. We will have Lynn Alden tomorrow afternoon who will talk more about that. And unfortunately, we're in that situation that it's almost inevitable. That's why the long-term success of crypto in some form becoming a major reserve asset in the world is almost certain. It's a matter of, I don't know how many years, that's really difficult to predict, but
I think that's true.
In my mind, it's certain that it's going to happen, just a matter of time.
And when you say crypto there, you mean primarily Bitcoin at the moment, right? Because Bitcoin's kind of
Bitcoin has the highest chance of achieving that. It has its own problems in terms of scaling and some privacy issues, but it has the highest network effect, the highest, the biggest history, probably the biggest security. So it has the highest chance. How exactly it's going to unfold? It's probably going to be a few networks out there, probably not just one. So I think that will unfold in a good way, in a more clear way in the next 5 years, because we've already tried every scaling possible way, and it will become obvious that what works in the next 5 years, I think. Yeah. So I just want to make a very quick last announcement, and I think we can wrap it up. Me and my business partner, Dimitar Velev, who is here in the audience, we're looking for a third partner to help us with the investment strategy. So if anybody is interested in that, come talk to us after the panel.
Ooh,
and
that's a good offer.
Elena, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, let's hope for better times.
Thank you, Blagovest.